in the desolate dust of the Arizona Territory, where life was cheap and justice swifter than a hangman's knot. One desperate act changed everything. Picture Lyra Hayes, a ranch girl, hardened by sun and sorrow, standing at a crossroads, her small, calloused hands gripping a secret that could mean her own demise. She looked into the eyes of Cole Beaumont, a notorious outlaw bound for the gallows, and in that fleeting moment defied fate. What drove her? A flicker of shared humanity, a desperate gamble against the unforgiving frontier. Little did she know this single audacious choice would unravel a tale of betrayal, redemption, and a love story stranger than any legend, culminating in a return that would shock the entire Wild West. The wind was a constant, mournful companion on the Hayes family's ranch, Whispering Pines. It sang through the skeletal mesquite trees and whipped at Lyra Hayes's calico dress, stinging her eyes with fine red dust. At 20, Lyra possessed a quiet resilience, a trait carved into her by years of drought debt and the relentless, unforgiving sun that bleached the very life from the land. Her hands, though small, were strong, accustomed to mending fences, breaking wild ponies, and coaxing stubborn life from parched soil. They were the hands of a woman who knew hardship as intimately as she knew the worn leather of her saddle. Whispering Pines wasn't living up to its name. The whispers were more like groans of despair. The last 2 seasons had seen less rain than a preacher's promise, and the cattle lean and ribs showing were dwindled to a fraction of their former herd. Her father, Thomas Hayes, a man whose spirit had once been as broad and unyielding as the plains themselves, now moved with a stoop. His gaze often lost somewhere beyond the horizon, searching for rain that never came. Her mother, Martha, kept their small cabin spotless, a desperate hold on order in a world spiraling into chaos. Her hymns sung softly at dusk, masking a growing anxiety. And then there was little Timmy, only 6, too young to understand the dark clouds gathering over their home, though he felt their chill in the strained silences and the scarcity of butter on his bread. They were barely scraping by. The bank in Redemption Ridge, run by the unyielding, corpulent figure of Ebenezer Crowley, was circling like a vulture. The next payment was due in a month, and if they couldn't meet it, Whispering Pines, the land that had been in the Hayes family for 3 generations, would be lost. It was late afternoon, the sun a fiery orb dipping towards the western ridge when Lyra first saw him. A dust cloud too small for a wagon, too fast for cattle, was approaching from the south. She'd been hauling water from the well, the wooden buckets heavy, her shoulders aching. She squinted her seasoned eyes, quickly discerning the shape, a lone rider moving with a desperate urgency that spoke of flight, not travel. He was a blur of motion, but even at a distance, something about him screamed trouble. His horse, a magnificent roan, was lathered with sweat, its flanks heaving. As he drew closer, the rider swayed precariously in the saddle. Lyra froze, a primal instinct to retreat, warring with a strange, compelling curiosity. They didn't get many visitors out here, and none arrived like this. Suddenly the horse stumbled, its front legs buckling, and rider and beast went down in a cloud of red earth. Lyra gasped, dropping her buckets. Water sloshed, soaking her boots, but she barely noticed. A man was down. She hesitated for only a second, then ran. Her father was out checking the fence lines far to the north. Her mother and Timmy were inside. She was alone. As she drew near, the smell of dust mingled with the coppery tang of blood. The roan was trying to push itself up, whinnying in pain, one leg twisted at an unnatural angle. The man lay still, face down in the dirt. Fear warred with something deeper, a human impulse to aid. She knelt, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. Gently she rolled him onto his back. What she saw sent a shiver down her spine. He was young, perhaps in his late 20s, with a lean, sun-baked face, strong jaw, and dark hair matted with sweat. But it was his eyes now fluttering open that truly captivated her. A startling, intense blue, rimmed with pain, but burning with an untamed fire. A dark, rapidly spreading stain blossomed on his left side, just below his ribs, soaking through his worn buckskin jacket. He'd been shot. "Water," he rasped, his voice a dry whisper. Lyra remembered the spilled water. I can get it more. Are you a bandit?" The question tumbled out before she could stop it. A ghost of a smile touched his lips, a flicker of dark amusement. "Depends on who you ask, ma'am. Some call me Cole Beaumont." The name hit her like a physical blow. Cole Beaumont. The papers nailed to the post office wall in Redemption Ridge, faded and flapping, bore his likeness. Wanted dead or alive, for bank robbery, stagecoach hold-ups, and the murder of Deputy Silas Blackwood. The reward was substantial enough to save Whispering Pines many times over. Her mind raced. Turn him in. It was the sensible, logical, perhaps even moral thing to do. Her family was in peril. Here was their salvation, lying wounded at her feet. But then his gaze met hers again. Those piercing blue eyes, filled not with malice, but with a raw vulnerability that tore at something deep within her. He wasn't the monster the posters depicted. He was just a man bleeding and broken, and moments from death. "They're after me," he whispered, his eyes scanning the horizon, a desperate urgency entering his voice. "Sheriff Grissom. He won't give me a fair trial. He wants me hanged." Sheriff Bartholomew, Bart Grissom, a heavy-set, self-important man whose justice often felt as arbitrary as the desert wind. He'd once impounded old Jebediah's only horse for a $2 gambling debt, leaving the old man stranded. Lyra knew Grissom's type. He loved the spectacle of a hanging, the power it gave him. Cole Beaumont would be a trophy. Lyra made a decision that would haunt her and eventually define her. It was rash, illogical, and utterly against everything she knew she should do. But seeing the desperation in his eyes, feeling the faint warmth of his skin against her touch, something snapped. Maybe it was a rebellion against the bleakness of her own life, a yearning for something outside the rigid confines of their struggle. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the simple, undeniable pull of compassion. "Can you walk?" she asked, her voice surprisingly steady. He nodded, grimacing as he tried to shift. "Maybe. With help." "My father will be back soon," she said, glancing nervously toward the setting sun. "We need to get you inside. Quickly." She helped him up his weight, heavy against her slight frame. His roan, she realized with a pang, was beyond saving. A clean shot with her father's rifle would be a mercy. But first, Cole. They limped towards the cabin, a strange, mismatched pair. Lyra, the dutiful ranch girl aiding the notorious outlaw. Every step felt like a gamble, every beat of her heart a drum roll towards an uncertain fate. Inside the small, sparsely furnished cabin, Lyra guided him to a cot in the corner of the main room, usually reserved for unexpected guests. He sank onto it with a groan. Martha was in the kitchen, humming softly as she kneaded dough, her back to them. Timmy was playing with wooden blocks by the fireplace. "Mama," Lyra said, her voice strained but calm. "I need hot water and clean cloths. There's There's been an accident. A rider fell near the creek. She avoided eye contact with Cole, hoping her mother wouldn't notice the tension radiating from him, the fear coiling in her own stomach. Martha turned her brow furrowed. An accident? Is he badly hurt? Her eyes fell on Cole, then widened slightly at the sight of his torn jacket and pale face. Before she could ask more, Lyra quickly interjected. He's got a bad cut. Please, Mama, hurry. Martha, ever the nurturer, though surprised, moved to the stove without further question, already heating water. Lyra fetched her father's old medical kit, a battered leather pouch containing whiskey bandages and a few basic tools. It's a gunshot, Cole murmured, seeing her hesitant movements. Through and through, I think, but it's bleeding something fierce. Lyra nodded, her mouth dry. I see it. She unbuttoned his jacket, then his shirt, revealing the ragged, ugly wound. It looked worse up close, inflamed and angry. She poured some whiskey on a cloth, wincing herself as she prepared to clean it. This is going to sting, she warned, though her voice trembled. He gave a weak nod, his jaw clenched. Go on. She cleaned the wound as best she could, her fingers surprisingly steady, despite her churning stomach. The whiskey made him gasp, but he didn't cry out. She applied a crude poultice made from herbs Martha kept for minor ailments, hoping it would draw out infection, then bandaged him tightly. He was weak, feverish, but alive. Just as she finished, a distant sound reached her ears, the faint thud of horses' hooves. Her heart leapt into her throat. They're here, Cole whispered, his eyes wide with alarm. Grissom. He must have followed my trail. Lyra's mind raced. There was no time to move him. The cabin was too small, too exposed. Panic threatened to overwhelm her. But then a flicker of the same stubborn resolve that had led her to save him ignited within her. She looked at the small, narrow space under Timmy's bed. It was cramped, dusty, but might just offer a temporary refuge. Under the bed, she hissed, pointing. Timmy's bed. Hurry. Cole, despite his weakness, understood the urgency. He gritted his teeth, pushed himself up, and with a painful grunt, squeezed himself into the tight space, pulling the faded quilt down to conceal himself. Martha, still oblivious to the true nature of their guest, was humming again, stirring something on the stove. Timmy looked up, his bright eyes curious, but said nothing. The thudding grew louder, closer. Then the rhythmic creak of saddle leather, the jingle of spurs, and the heavy, deliberate footsteps approaching their front door. A loud, authoritative rap echoed through the small cabin. Hayes, Sheriff Grissom, open up. Lyra's blood ran cold. This was it, the moment of truth. She glanced at Timmy, whose innocent eyes were now fixed on her, sensing her distress. She straightened her dress, took a deep breath, and walked to the door, her hand hovering over the latch, trying to appear as calm as a summer breeze, while her insides were a tempest. She opened the door. Sheriff Bartholomew Grissom stood on their porch, his broad frame filling the doorway, his face a road map of hard living and self-importance. Behind him stood two deputies, their rifles held loosely, their gazes sweeping over the Hayes property. Sheriff, Lyra said, her voice surprisingly level. What brings you to Whispering Pines at this hour? Grissom's eyes narrowed, taking in her slightly disheveled appearance, the faint stain on her dress. Evening, Lyra. We're tracking a dangerous outlaw, Cole Beaumont. Saw a rider pass this way. His horse lost a shoe not a mile from your property line. You seen anyone? Lyra's gaze remained steady. No, Sheriff. No one. Just my father and I working the ranch. It's been quiet. She gestured vaguely towards the empty, dusty expanse around them. Not much traffic out here. Grissom's eyes lingered on her, then shifted to Martha, who had stopped stirring and was now watching from the kitchen, a confused look on her face. Timmy peeked out from behind his mother's skirt. "You wouldn't be hiding anything from me now, would you, Lyra?" Grissom's voice was low, laced with a threat. "Harboring an outlaw is a serious offense. You know that. Could land you in the federal penitentiary." A chill went down Lyra's spine. She felt Cole's presence barely a few feet away, hidden by a thin quilt. Her heart hammered. "Sheriff, we're honest folk," Lyra said, her voice firm, tinged with a weariness that was genuine. "We barely have enough strength to keep this ranch afloat. We're not looking for trouble." She forced a small, tired smile. "If we saw an outlaw, we'd be the first to report it. We've got a small boy here to protect." Grissom grunted, his eyes still suspicious. He took a step inside his boots, scuffing the clean wooden floor. He looked around the small room, his gaze sweeping over the cot, the fireplace, the small, narrow bed where Timmy slept. Lyra held her breath, every muscle tense. "Mind if my deputies take a quick look around?" he asked, though it wasn't a question. "You're welcome to," Lyra said, her voice unwavering. "But you won't find anything but dust and desperation, Sheriff." The two deputies entered their boots, loud on the floor. One went to the small pantry, the other casually glanced under the beds, including Timmy's. Lyra's heart seized. She saw the deputy stoop, his eyes scanning the floor. Cole was just out of his direct line of sight, pushed as far back into the shadows as he could manage. The deputy straightened up, apparently satisfied, or perhaps just bored. "Nothing here, Sheriff," one deputy mumbled. Grissom sighed, clearly frustrated. He'd been so sure. "All right, Lyra, we'll be moving on. But if you see anything at all, you send word to Redemption Ridge. You understand?" "We understand, Sheriff," Lyra said, her relief a dizzying wave. With a final lingering look of suspicion, Grissom turned and stomped off the porch, his deputies following. The sounds of horses receding into the twilight were the sweetest melody Lyra had ever heard. She closed the door, leaning against it, her legs trembling. Martha turned, her confusion now mixed with concern. "Lyra, what was that all about?" "An outlaw. It's nothing, Mama," Lyra said, waving a dismissive hand, though her voice was still shaky. "Just the sheriff chasing shadows. You know how he is." From under the bed, Cole slowly, painfully emerged. He looked at Lyra, his blue eyes filled with an intensity that sent a fresh shiver through her. "You saved my life," he whispered, his voice raspy with emotion and pain. Lyra just nodded, unable to speak, the weight of her deed settling upon her. She had just committed a federal offense. She had harbored a known killer. And for what? A desperate, dying man who was probably better off dead, at least in the eyes of the law. Yet looking at him now, a strange sense of defiance settled over her. She had made her choice. Now she would live with it. The next few days were a blur of hushed movements and stolen glances. Lyra nursed Cole Beaumont back to health with a quiet determination that surprised even herself. She changed his bandages, brought him water and thin gruel, and spoke little. Martha, though still somewhat bewildered, was too kind-hearted to refuse aid to a wounded man, accepting Lyra's vague explanations about a fall and a bad cut. Thomas Hayes, when he returned, was more preoccupied with the dwindling herd and the looming debt to notice much amiss, though he did grumble about the lazy guest, who seemed to take up space without contributing. Lyra simply told him the man was recovering from a bad accident and would be gone soon. Cole, for his part, was a silent, watchful presence. He barely spoke, but his eyes followed Lyra, observing her every move, the way she managed the ranch with quiet efficiency, the tenderness she showed Timmy, the worry lines etched on her father's face. He saw the struggle of whispering and Mandhul, the worn clothes, the frugal meals, the ever-present. He saw their desperation, and he understood. As his strength slowly returned, he began to help. First small things, mending a broken chair, sharpening tools, then larger tasks. He possessed a surprising skill with horses, and soon the few remaining Hayes's mares were looking healthier, their coats gleaming. He fixed the faulty pump on the well, a task Thomas had put off for months. He even showed Lyra a trick for catching wild hares, supplementing their meager diet. He worked tirelessly, silently, as if trying to repay an unpayable debt. Lyra watched him, a complicated mix of emotions swirling within her. He was a bandit, a wanted man. Yet he was also kind, capable, and respectful. He never pressed her with questions about why she saved him, nor did he boast of his past. He simply existed, a quiet force of unexpected competence. One evening, as the stars began to prick the inky canvas of the sky, they sat on the porch watching Timmy chase fireflies. Thomas and Martha were already inside. "You shouldn't have done it," Cole said, his voice low, breaking the comfortable silence. Lyra looked at him surprised. "Done what?" "Saved me," he clarified, turning his intense blue gaze on her. "You risked everything for a man you knew nothing about. A wanted man." "I knew you were bleeding," Lyra replied, her voice soft. "That was enough." He looked away across the moonlit plains. "They say I killed a deputy, Silas Blackwood. It wasn't like that." Lyra waited, sensing he needed to speak. "He was a good man, Silas." Cole continued, his voice heavy. "He got in the way during the Redemption Ridge bank robbery. It was a mistake. We never meant to hurt anyone. We just needed the money. Desperate times." He paused. It was chaos. Shots were fired. He got caught in the crossfire. But Grissom, he spun it. Made me a cold-blooded killer. Lyra listened, a flicker of understanding blooming in her heart. Desperate times. She knew those. "I need to go," Cole said finally, his voice firm, "before I bring more trouble down on your head." Lyra felt a pang of something she couldn't quite name. Relief, or something else. "You're strong enough now." He nodded, pushing himself up. "Strong enough. I owe you. More than I can ever repay." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, tarnished silver locket. "This was my mother's. It's all I have. Please take it. As a promise. One day I'll return it and pay my debt properly." Lyra hesitated, then took the locket. It was warm in her palm, a tangible link to this enigmatic man. "You don't owe me anything." He looked at her, his blue eyes holding hers, a depth of emotion passing between them that transcended words. "Yes, I do, Lyra Hayes. More than you know." He turned, melted into the shadows, and was gone. Just like that. The silence he left behind was profound, filled with the vastness of the prairie and the echoes of an impossible secret. Lyra clutched the locket, its cold metal growing warm against her skin. She looked out at the empty expanse where he had disappeared, a notorious bandit, a man with a price on his head. She had saved him, and now he was gone. She wondered if she would ever see him again, or if this strange, dangerous episode would simply fade into the endless, forgotten sagas of the Wild West. Little did she know this was merely the first act in a drama far grander and more perilous than she could ever imagine. The debt, it seemed, was only just beginning to be paid. Cole Beaumont's departure left an undeniable ache in Lyra's chest, a space where his dangerous presence and quiet companionship had resided. The silver locket, a secret testament to their connection, remained hidden beneath her dress. Whispering Pines felt emptier. The silence broken only by the mournful wind and the distant lowing of their dwindling herd. The days that followed were a monotonous cycle of struggle. The well water levels plummeted, threatening to dry up completely. The corn, what little they'd planted, was brittle and yellowing. Thomas Hayes Lyra's father moved with a heavier step, despair etched deeper into his face. Martha, her mother, hummed hymns with a trembling voice, her gaze often fixed on the calendar, where the looming date of their next payment to Ebenezer Crowley, the unyielding banker, glowered like a brand of judgment. Ebenezer Crowley, the proprietor of Redemption Ridge's only bank, was a man whose generosity was as scarce as rain. He was pale and impeccably dressed, a stark contrast to the sun-baked ranchers, his cold, calculating eyes always seeking advantage. 2 weeks after Cole's disappearance, a burly enforcer from Crowley's bank, Jedediah Jed Holt, arrived. "Crowley sent me," Jed Holt announced, gruff and without pleasantries. "Payment's due in a week. He says you haven't made good on your last 3 installments. If you don't get his money, he's taking the land." Lyra's breath caught. 3 installments. Her father had said they were only behind on 1, maybe 2. Crowley was twisting the screws. "That's not right, Mr. Holt. We've been struggling, but my father said—" "I don't care what your father said, girl," Holt interrupted, spitting tobacco juice onto the dusty ground. "Crowley's got the papers, signed and sealed. A week, or Whispering Pines belongs to the bank." He leaned forward, his eyes glinting. "And don't even think about running off. Sheriff Grissom's got eyes everywhere, and he's still asking about that Bandit Beaumont. You sure you haven't seen him lurking about?" Lyra felt a fresh wave of fear, quickly masked by a defiant stare. "I told the sheriff what I know. We haven't seen anyone." Holt scoffed, then wheeled his horse around, leaving Lyra choking on dust. That night, silence choked the Hayes cabin. Thomas stared into the fireplace, slumped in defeat. "He's doing it, Martha," he murmured. "Crowley's going to take everything." Martha wept softly, clutching Timmy. Lyra watched them, a fierce protectiveness rising. They couldn't lose Whispering Pines. The idea that came to her was reckless, crazy even. But the despair in her father's eyes, her mother's tears and Timmy's innocent fear propelled her. Cole Beaumont had said he owed her. He had given her his mother's locket as a promise. A promise. She knew where Cole and his gang, the Desert Hawks, were rumored to frequent Redemption Gulch, a lawless settlement deep in the mountains to the west. Going there was madness. But what choice did she have? The next morning before sunrise, Lyra slipped out. She packed jerky water and her father's old Colt .45 revolver. She had never fired it, but its weight was a small comfort. She saddled her mare Buttercup. "I'm going to Redemption Ridge," she told her parents, her voice betraying none of her turmoil. "To try and reason with Crowley. Maybe he'll give us more time." It was a lie. Thomas nodded, defeated. Martha hugged her, silently praying. Lyra rode out, heart pounding, the locket clutched beneath her dress. The journey to Redemption Gulch was arduous. The landscape was brutal, the trails barely discernible. The sun beat down mercilessly. She rode for 2 days, sleeping under the stars, startled by every rustle her hand near the colt. On the 3rd day, navigating a narrow canyon, she heard gunfire. Distant at first, then closer echoing off the canyon walls. Adrenaline surged. She spurred Buttercup forward, curiosity overriding fear. She rounded a bend and saw it Redemption Gulch, a dusty clearing, tents, shacks, men firing at rivals behind an overturned wagon. "Cole!" she screamed, her voice lost in the din. She spotted him surprisingly composed. Cole Beaumont. His blue eyes narrowed, directing his men a rifle expertly wielded. He was no longer the wounded man she'd nursed. This was the outlaw leader of the Desert Hawks. As she started to approach, a sharp crack echoed, and a bullet whistled past her ear, kicking up dust near Buttercup's hooves. The mare reared, whinnying. Lyra clung on, disoriented. Cole, hearing Buttercup's cry, turned. His eyes widened in disbelief. "Lyra! What in God's name are you doing here?" Before he could move, a grizzled, scar-faced man emerged from behind the wagon rifle, aimed directly at Cole. "Beaumont!" he roared. "You're dead!" Instinct took over. Without thinking, Lyra pulled her father's Colt. It felt shockingly heavy. Her aim was true. The shot rang out. The man staggered, clutched his shoulder, and dropped his rifle, howling in pain. All eyes turned to Lyra. The gunfight ceased, replaced by stunned silence. Cole stared at her, then at the smoking Colt, a mixture of shock and awe on his face. "Lyra," he said again, barely above a whisper. "You shot him." "He was going to shoot you," she said, her voice trembling now that the adrenaline was fading. Cole's men, a motley crew, eyed her with suspicion and grudging respect. One, a wiry man with a long moustache named Billy, stepped forward. "Who is this Cole, your new recruit?" Cole shook his head, a wry smile touching his lips. "No, Billy. This is Lyra Hayes, the woman who saved my life. Twice now, it seems." He walked towards her, his expression softening. "Why are you here, Lyra?" "It's not safe." Tears pricked Lyra's eyes. All the fear, exhaustion, and desperation spilled out. "Crowley," she choked out. "He's taking the ranch. He said, a week. He's going to seize Whispering Pines if we don't pay up." Cole's jaw tightened. Crowley. That snake. He knew the banker's predatory ways. He led her to a makeshift, surprisingly clean tent and poured her lukewarm coffee. He listened patiently as she recounted their struggles, the drought, the dwindling cattle, her father's despair. He saw the truth in her eyes, felt the weight of her family's plight. "I gave you my mother's locket as a promise," Lyra said, pulling it out. "You said you owed me." Cole looked at the locket, then back at her. His gaze was intense. "I did, and I do." He paused, then looked at his men. "Boys," he called out, his voice firm. "We're going to Redemption Ridge. We have a debt to collect." Murmurs rippled through the gang. "Redemption Ridge, Cole." "That's Grissom's territory," Billy warned. "I know whose territory it is." Cole snapped, his voice hard. "But a debt is a debt, and Lyra Hayes isn't just anyone. She saved my life. Twice." He looked back at Lyra. "We'll get your ranch back, Lyra, one way or another." The next morning, Lyra rode back with Cole and his Desert Hawks. The sight of the infamous gang riding silently, purposefully, was intimidating, but Lyra felt a strange sense of calm, a desperate hope blooming. They approached Redemption Ridge under the cloak of pre-dawn darkness. Cole had a daring plan, relying on speed and surprise. They would hit Crowley's bank the moment it opened, before Sheriff Grissom and his deputies were fully alert. Lyra waited with Buttercup on a secluded bluff overlooking the town, her heart thumping. She watched Cole and his men move like shadows through the deserted streets, taking positions. Then the sudden jarring sound of the bank's front door splintering, followed by shouts and gunshots. Lyra flinched, instinctively ducking. The town alarm bell began to ring. She strained her eyes. What if Cole was caught? Just as the sun began to peek over the eastern horizon, the sound subsided. Then she saw them. Cole and his men emerging from the bank, their saddlebags bulging. They moved fast, mounting their horses, faces grim but victorious. They rode hard and fast, leaving the chaos behind. Lyra met them a few miles out. "Did you get it?" she gasped. Cole nodded, pulling a heavy canvas bag from his saddlebag. He opened it, revealing gleaming gold coins and bundles of paper currency, enough to pay off Crowley 10 times over. "We cleaned out Crowley's personal safe," Cole said, a grim satisfaction in his voice. "He had more than just the bank's money in there. Seems our friend Mr. Crowley was holding on to a lot of ill-gotten gains of his own." Lyra stared at the gold, then at Cole. He was a bandit, a criminal, but he had come through. He had risked everything for her family, for Whispering Pines. The world, she realized, was far more complicated than simple notions of good and evil. They rode back to Whispering Pines, arriving under cover of darkness. The next morning, Lyra set the heavy canvas bag on the table. Thomas and Martha stared, mouths agape. Timmy watched with wide, curious eyes. Where did this come from?" "Lyra," Thomas stammered. "It's from a friend," Lyra said, avoiding her father's gaze. "It's enough to pay off Crowley, enough to save Whispering Pines." Thomas picked up a gold coin, a slow, disbelieving smile spreading across his face, a smile Lyra hadn't seen in years. Martha gasped, tears of relief streaming down her face. "We're saved," she whispered. Lyra knew the questions would come eventually, but for now the immediate crisis was averted. They were safe. Whispering Pines was safe. All thanks to Cole Beaumont, the bandit she had saved from the hangman's noose. The very next day, Thomas Hayes, looking years younger, rode into Redemption Ridge with Lyra, the canvas bag heavy. They walked into Crowley's bank, heads held high. Ebenezer Crowley, his office in disarray, looked at the gold with fury and disbelief. This is my money stolen," he roared. "This is the payment for Whispering Pins, Mr. Crowley." Thomas said, his voice ringing with newfound confidence. "Paid in full, and then some. We believe you owe us some interest for your predatory practices." He pushed a stack of coins across the desk. "Count it, and then sign the papers transferring the deed free and clear." Crowley sputtered his eyes, darting to the empty spot where his personal safe had been. He knew he couldn't call the sheriff without implicating himself. He was caught. With a furious scowl, he signed the documents, his hand trembling. As they rode home, the signed deed clutched in Thomas's hand, a weight lifted from Lyra's shoulders. But even as joy enveloped her family, a new anxiety settled in. She had accepted stolen money. She was complicit, and the man who had brought it to her, the man who now held a peculiar claim on her heart, was a wanted outlaw. Cole Beaumont had fulfilled his promise. But what would his return truly mean for Lyra Hayes and for Whispering Pines in the long and dangerous days ahead? The dust of the past was settling, but the winds of the future promised more storms. The relief at Whispering Pines was profound. After Crowley's debt was paid, a palpable sense of peace that made Thomas Hayes walk lighter and Martha hum with genuine joy. Young Timmy, sensing the shift was brighter, his laughter echoing through the small cabin. Lyra watched them, a deep satisfaction warming her, knowing she had saved her family and their home. Yet beneath this newfound calm, a tremor of anxiety persisted within her. The source of their salvation was a dark secret, and secrets, like desert storms, inevitably broke. Word of the Hayes family's sudden prosperity, coupled with the mysterious robbery of Ebenezer Crowley's personal safe, spread quickly in Redemption Ridge. Crowley, furious but trapped by his own illicit dealings, dared not publicly accuse the Hayes. However, his venomous whispers found fertile ground. Sheriff Bartholomew Grissom, cunning and stubborn, quickly connected the dots, his inquiries increasingly focusing on the Hayes and the lingering shadow of Cole Beaumont. "Funny thing, Lyra," Grissom remarked one sweltering afternoon, finding her mending a fence line. He had ridden out alone, a calculated move to disarm her. "That Beaumont fella, he's a slippery one, robs Crowley clean out, and then wouldn't you know it? The Hayes suddenly got enough coin to buy a small town. Just a coincidence, I suppose." His small, beady eyes tried to bore into her. Lyra straightened, wiping sweat from her brow, maintaining a steady gaze despite her hammering heart. "Sheriff, we're honest folk. We've just been working hard, saving every penny, and the good Lord finally saw fit to bless us with a bit of luck." She had become adept at this dangerous game. "Luck," Grissom scoffed. "Some folks call it that. Others call it harboring a wanted man. A federal crime, Lyra. Comes with a long stay in a very unpleasant place." He dismounted, stepping closer. "You remember that reward for Beaumont, dead or alive. You could have been set for life. But no, you claim you haven't seen a thing. It don't add up, girl." "I told you, Sheriff," Lyra insisted, her voice tinged with weariness. "We're too busy trying to keep food on our table to be looking for outlaws. We're grateful for what we have, and we earned it honest." Grissom stared, then slowly nodded. "Right. Well, keep those ears open, Lyra, and your eyes. A man like Beaumont, he don't just disappear. He always comes back. And when he does, I'll be waiting. And anyone who helps him, they'll regret it." He mounted his horse and rode off, leaving Lyra with the heavy weight of his unspoken threat. The encounter left her shaken. Grissom was relentless, and she knew it was only a matter of time before his suspicions hardened into proof, or before Cole inevitably reappeared. Her internal conflict deepened. She still wore Cole's locket, a constant reminder of his daring act and dangerous kindness. She recalled his piercing blue eyes, the quiet strength that had radiated from him. The world called him killer, thief, outlaw. Yet she had seen a different side, a man capable of loyalty, courage, and honoring a promise. She missed his slant presence, the way he seemed to understand her without words. This was a perilous path for her heart. Despite the gold life on Whispering Pines remained harsh, the relentless drought persisted. Their wells were dangerously low, their fields barren. The money, while paying off the bank, couldn't conjure rain or fertile land. They desperately needed a new permanent water source. Thomas had always dreamed of digging a deeper well, tapping an aquifer, but it was expensive, labor-intensive work, requiring specialized equipment they still couldn't truly afford. They had to be careful with their new wealth. One evening, an old prospector, Silas Old Man Jenkins, stumbled onto their property. His rheumy eyes gleamed with genuine excitement. "Lyra Thomas," he croaked. "I found it. A seepage, a natural spring, barely a trickle, but it runs deep. Could be a mighty fine source of water if a man had the means to tap it proper." Thomas was cautious. A spring, Silas. You sure? Sure as the sun rises. But it's a tricky bit of land, right on the edge of the old Blackwood claim. And it's a steep incline. You'd need some heavy blasting to clear a path for a decent flow. Dangerous work. Lyra's mind immediately went to coal. Blasting. He'd once mentioned knowing about explosives. This was a desperate need, but also a dangerous proposition. The following weeks brought escalating threats. Grissom increased his patrols, and a new, more immediate danger emerged. Jedediah Jed Kincaid, a grasping, bullying rancher who owned the adjoining slightly more fertile land. Kincaid had always harbored a grudge against Thomas Hayes. One morning, Lyra found Kincaid and two of his ranch hands near the newly discovered spring. "Heard you Hayes got a new water source," Kincaid sneered. "Funny that. We always thought that spring was on our side of the line." "It's on Hayes' land, Jedediah," Lyra stated firmly. "Old man Jenkins confirmed it." Kincaid laughed, pulling out a crumpled doctored map. "My surveyor, Cletus, he says different. Says that spring runs right through my property." He let his hand drop to his pistol. "I'll be taking this water, Lyra, and if you try to stop me, well, things could get ugly." Lyra's heart pounded. Kincaid was dangerous, and she couldn't fight them alone. She returned to the cabin, shaking with anger and fear. The new money had averted one crisis, but created others. It painted a target on their backs, attracting the law and greedy neighbors. She knew what she had to do. The spring was their lifeline. They couldn't let Kincaid take it. And Kincaid wouldn't back down without force. That night, Lyra made a desperate decision. She needed help, someone who understood desperation, who operated outside the law, who could handle dangerous situations. She needed Cole Beaumont. She penned a short, urgent letter. "Cole Whispering Pines is in trouble again. New trouble. Kincaid. He's trying to claim the spring, and Grissom is circling. We need water. We need help. I know you said you owed me. The locket is still safe." Lyra. She knew reaching him would be nearly impossible. Redemption. Gulch was dangerous, and Cole was constantly evading Grissom. But old man Jenkins knew a runner, a quiet young man, named Silas Dusty Rhodes, who could deliver a message to the Gulch. Lyra paid him a portion of their precious gold and watched him ride off, praying. Days dragged into a week. Kincaid's men rode aggressively near the spring, intimidating the Hayes. Thomas tried to reason with Kincaid, but was met only with ridicule and threats. Martha fretted constantly. Lyra felt the walls closing in. Just as despair threatened to consume her, a faint dust cloud appeared on the horizon. Her heart leapt. It was him. Cole Beaumont rode onto Whispering Pines land as the sun set his dark duster, blending with the twilight. He was alone, his black stallion, Shadow, moving with silent grace. He looked Lena harder, but his blue eyes as they met hers held the same intense light she remembered. Lyra ran to him, a rush of relief and undeniable joy. "Cole," she breathed. He dismounted, his gaze sweeping over the ranch, noting the signs of renewed struggle. "Your letter," he said, his voice low. "You're in deep trouble, Lyra Hayes." "We are," she admitted, tears stinging her eyes. "Kincaid wants the spring, and Grissom, he suspects everything. He knows you were here." Cole's jaw tightened. Grissom's always been a hound. As for Kincaid, some men only understand one language: He listened as Lyra explained the precarious situation with the spring Kincaid's bullying and Grissom's persistent suspicions. He also noticed the subtle way Lyra's hand would go to her chest, where he knew the locket lay. He saw the strength in her eyes, the quiet defiance that had deepened. He saw a woman who had fought for her family, risked everything, and emerged stronger. And he felt a pull towards her, a connection beyond mere gratitude. "The spring needs to be secured," Cole said, finally, his gaze fixed on the distant outline of the Blackwood claim. "Permanently. And Kincaid needs to understand who it truly belongs to. As for Grissom, we'll deal with him when the time comes." He then revealed his plan, audacious, dangerous, and utterly typical of Cole Beaumont. He would secure the spring, using his knowledge of explosives to clear a path for the water, making it a viable, permanent source. This would cement the Hayes claim, and then he would face Kincaid. "Blasting!" Thomas Hayes exclaimed aghast. "Cole, that's too dangerous. And if Grissom hears—" "We do it at night," Cole said, calm and resolute. "Quietly. And if Kincaid tries anything, he'll find a fight he wasn't expecting." Lyra watched him, a wild hope surging through her. He wasn't just a bandit. He was their last chance. Over the next few nights, under cover of darkness, Cole worked tirelessly, aided by Lyra. He set small, carefully placed charges, teaching Lyra how to handle the fuses. He worked with a precision that belied his outlaw reputation. The controlled explosions were muffled by the night. Each blast chipped away at the rock, slowly revealing the promise of flowing water. Finally, on the fourth night, after a larger, perfectly executed blast, a gush of clear, cold water erupted from the newly opened rock face. It wasn't a trickle. It was a steady, powerful flow. A true spring. It was a miracle. Lyra watched, the water tears streaming down her face. "You did it," she whispered, looking at Cole. Her heart overflowing with gratitude and something much deeper. He smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile that transformed his rugged face. "We did it, Lyra." But their triumph was short-lived. Just as dawn touched the horizon, Kincaid rode in, not alone, but with a dozen of his armed ranch hands. He had heard the blasts, and his suspicions had turned to outright aggression. "All right, Hayes," Kincaid bellowed, his eyes red-rimmed with fury as he saw the gushing water. "I knew it. You've been trespassing, dynamiting on my land. This water's mine." Cole stepped forward, putting himself between Lyra and Kincaid. He held no weapon, but his presence radiated a quiet authority that made Kincaid hesitate. "This land, Jedediah," Cole said, his voice dangerously low, "belongs to the Hayes. This spring, too, and you know it. This isn't about boundaries, it's about greed, and I suggest you turn your men around before you make a very big mistake." Kincaid scoffed. "And who are you, stranger, to tell me what to do? You look like trouble, and I don't take orders from no drifter." He glanced at Lyra, then back at Cole, a dawning realization in his eyes. "Wait a minute. That face, those eyes. You're Beaumont. The bandit Grissom's looking for you. Who?" Just then, as if summoned by Kincaid's words, Sheriff Bartholomew Grissom, with 4 deputies, rode hard and fast towards the spring. He had clearly heard the louder final blast and was now closing in. Lyra's blood ran cold. Caught between Kincaid's armed men and Grissom's lawmen, they were trapped. Cole, the man who had brought them so much, was now undeniably their greatest danger. The air crackled with tension, pregnant with the promise of violence. This was the moment. The price of saving an outlaw, the cost of a secret, was about to be paid in full. The rising sun, a fiery orange ball, cast long, stark shadows across the newly gushing spring. The air crackled with tension. Lyra stood between Jedediah Kincaid and his dozen armed men, their faces contorted with rage, and Sheriff Bartholomew Grissom with his 4 deputies closing in. At the center, Cole Beaumont stood calm, a shield against the threats. "Well, Beaumont," Grissom drawled, a smug grin spreading, "looks like your luck finally ran dry. And you, Lyra Hayes, you're coming with me for harboring a fugitive, a federal crime as I recall." Kincaid scoffed. "Grissom, hold on. This ain't about your bandit. This outlaw's been dynamiting my land, stealing my water. He's mine." "Your land, Kincaid." Cole's voice was dangerously low. "The original deed to this property signed over to Thomas Hayes's grandfather clearly states the line extends west of the old Blackwood Creek bed, right where this spring is now. As for dynamiting, I was simply improving the property line." Grissom frowned. "What deed are you talking about? The one I recovered from Crowley's private safe, Sheriff?" Cole replied, his eyes narrowing. "Along with other interesting documents Crowley acquired from vulnerable ranchers. Seems Crowley and Kincaid had an arrangement trying to bleed out honest folk like the Hayes and then swallow their land." Kincaid's face went white. "He's lying, Sheriff. He's a bandit. Am I?" Cole's eyes hardened. "Then why did your surveyor, Cletus, mysteriously vanish from Redemption Ridge the day Crowley's safe was emptied? Perhaps because the true original deed disproving your fraudulent claim to this Pringsu Usuparizuko surfaced." He paused, and Sheriff, among the documents I recovered was a ledger detailing weekly payments made by Crowley to a certain Sheriff Bartholomew Grissom for expedited services in land disputes. A stunned silence fell. Grissom's face flushed crimson, then paled. His deputies exchanged nervous glances. Kincaid looked sick. Cole hadn't just robbed Crowley. He'd exposed his corruption and Grissom's complicity. "You're making baseless accusations, Beaumont." Grissom sputtered, but his voice trembled. "Are they baseless?" Cole challenged. "Or just inconvenient? I have the ledger. I can provide it. My presence here is a personal matter to ensure the Hayes' property is secure. If you attempt to arrest me, that ledger will find its way to the territorial marshal, and I hear he's less understanding of local arrangements." Grissom was caught. His career, reputation, and freedom hung by a thread. He looked at Kincaid, whose furious scowl now mingled with fear. He looked at the gushing spring, then back at Cole, who stood defiantly. "This is not over, Beaumont," Grissom growled, defeated. He turned to Kincaid. "Kincaid, you and your men get off Hayes' land, now. This dispute will be settled by the law, not by violence." Kincaid cursed under his breath, rounded up his bewildered men, and retreated. Grissom, his face a mask of thinly veiled rage and humiliation, kept his eyes on Cole. "You're still a wanted man, Beaumont. Deputy Blackwood's death isn't forgotten." "Deputy Blackwood's death was a tragedy, Grissom." Cole replied, his voice softer. "A crossfire in a robbery gone wrong, not murder. I never meant him harm. If you think I won't fight for my name, you're mistaken. But that fight will be with the marshal, not with a crooked sheriff. Now I suggest you take your deputies and ride. Or would you prefer to deal with the marshal out here in the dust?" Grissom glared, then with a defeated sigh signaled his deputies. They turned their horses and rode off, leaving only the sound of the gushing spring and the morning breeze. Silence descended, a quiet profoundly different from any Lyra had known. The threats had receded. Whispering Pines was truly safe. She looked at Cole, her heart swelling with an emotion she could no longer deny. He had not only saved them again, but he had done so with a cunning and a courage that captivated her. He was a bandit, yes, but he was her bandit. "Cole," she whispered, stepping closer. You saved us. Again." He turned to her, his blue eyes softening. He reached into his inner jacket pocket and pulled out a folded official-looking paper. He handed it to her. Lyra unfolded it, her brow furrowed in confusion. Her eyes scanned the elegant script, and her breath hitched. Her gaze flew to the top. It was a marriage license, issued in Copper Creek, dated 2 days prior. Clearly written Cole Beaumont and Lyra Hayes. Lyra stared at it, then at him, her mind reeling. "Cole, what is this?" He smiled, a gentle, genuine smile, with a hint of nervousness. "After you sent Dusty with your letter, I knew I couldn't just come and go like before. Grissom was too close. Kincaid was too dangerous. You and your family, this ranch. It needed a more permanent solution, and I realized I needed one too." He took a deep breath, his gaze holding hers. "I might be an outlaw in the eyes of the law, Lyra, but I've got a code. You, Lyra Hayes, are the bravest, most honest woman I have ever known. You saw past the wanted posters, saw a man in need and risked everything. You saved my life twice over. And seeing you here fighting for your family for this land, it changed me." He reached out gently, taking her hand. "The law might say I'm a fugitive, but in Copper Creek, under a different name, I secured some official paperwork. A marriage license and a deed that would make me co-owner of this land. A husband. It would give me a legal right to defend this property, to stand by your side. It would complicate Grissom's pursuit, make it a domestic matter, not just a simple capture. And it would give you a protector. Someone who will fight for Whispering Pines as fiercely as you do." He paused, his thumb gently stroking her knuckles. "I know it's fast. I know it's audacious. But I'm not asking for a life of crime, Lyra. I'm asking for a chance at a different life. A life here with you protecting what's yours. Protecting you. I brought the gold back because I owed you. But I'm returning with this, Lyra, because I want you. Not just to repay a debt, but to build a future." His blue eyes, often filled with danger, were now vulnerable, hopeful. "So, Lyra Hayes, will you marry this bandit? Will you give me a chance to build an honest life with you here at Whispering Pines?" Lyra's mind raced. The absurdity. The danger. But beneath it all, a profound realization bloomed. He wasn't just offering protection. He was offering a partnership, a true joining of lives. He wasn't asking her to abandon her principles, but asking her to believe in his capacity for change, for goodness, for a life beyond the shadows. With startling clarity, she realized her heart had already chosen. The locket beneath her dress had already sealed a promise far deeper than silver and blood. She looked at the sunrise painting the sky, at the gushing water of their new spring, at her family's cabin, safe and sound. Then she looked back at Cole Beaumont, the bandit who had come back with gold and a marriage license. A slow smile spread across her face, mirroring the sunrise. "Yes, Cole Beaumont," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I will. But you'll have to learn to plant corn." A wide, relieved grin broke across his face, and he pulled her into a fierce, tender embrace. The harsh winds of the Arizona Territory still blew, but for Lyra Hayes and for Cole Beaumont, Whispering Pines was no longer just a struggling ranch. It was home, a testament to an unlikely love forged in desperation, tempered by danger, and built on a foundation of courage, redemption, and the unforeseen union of a ranch girl and a bandit. The sun rose higher, casting its golden light on their embrace, promising a future as wild and unpredictable, yet as full of hope as the land itself. And there you have it, the incredible nail-biting saga of Lyra Hayes and Cole Beaumont, a tale of courage, forbidden love, and a destiny stranger than fiction. From a desperate act of compassion to a daring return with gold and a marriage license. Their story reminds us that even in the harshest landscapes, hope, loyalty, and an unexpected connection can bloom. If this journey through the Wild West captivated your imagination, then don't let the adventure end here. Hit that like button to show your support. Share this epic tale with fellow story lovers, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more thrilling narratives from history's most fascinating corners. Join our community and never miss a story.